Welcome to another episode of Michigan's premier progressive podcast. It's Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. A progressive and populist insight into Michigan's political and cultural world. And of course, an entertaining show on how to make Michigan's political machine work for the people, and not just the elite few. Now, from the Left of Lansing headquarters from his mid-Michigan attic, it's time for the award-winning Pat Johnston. It's all yours, Pat.
Yeah! Welcome to another installment of Michigan's premier progressive podcast. I am Pat Johnston, and once this show is over, I am going to reward myself with a nice cold Oberon as my reward. And yes, I did have a beer on Oberon Day this past Monday, because for me, and I know for other Michiganders, it's just a sign that spring is going to get here someday. Coming up in a few moments, Leif Colt from Traverse Indivisible will join me to talk about the No Kings 3 protests taking place across Michigan and all of America this Saturday, March 28th. I'll be attending No Kings rallies in Alma and also in Mount Pleasant this Saturday, and I'm looking forward to meeting and talking with some of you there. As you know, I think it's a good idea to show how people are fighting for working class values and for democracy in some of our smaller and more rural areas of the state. So that's where I will be. But I thought I'd get an idea of what No Kings will look like in Traverse City, because I'll tell you what, the grassroots support for Traverse Indivisible and other Indivisible chapters across the state is quite remarkable. Now, the National Indivisible organization really got started after Trump's first victory in 2016 as kind of a response to some of the failed leadership and politics which brought us Donald Trump and MAGA fascism in the first place. And while Indivisible did make a mark back then, I think it's safe to say Indivisible and many other grassroots political advocacy groups have really kicked things up a notch since Dear Leader's second victory in 2024. And we're seeing that with the hands-off rallies last year and the previous No Kings rallies and marches, and also some of the protests that organically popped up across the country, like the ones we saw in Minneapolis after ICE murdered 2 American citizens. The working class is alert as to how this nation's politics has catered to the rich and untouchable Epstein class, and how that's been greatly exacerbated during the fascist Trump regime, which is aided and abetted by the MAGA Republican Party. And to be fair and honest, which I think we've been on here, it's also been aided and abetted by corporate/establishment Democrats. Since the late 1980s, establishment Democrats, like these third-way Democrat clowns, have shunned workers, have shunned unions, have shunned working-class values, and have ignored the working class altogether. And why? Because then you can get more corporate donations to help you flood campaigns and political party coffers. That's why. That's more money than working-class Americans who keep seeing their economic pictures and landscapes shrinking all around them. That's more than they can afford to contend with. And if you're looking for an explanation as to why establishment Democrats were slow to oppose the early days of the Trump regime's return to power, it's because many of these same establishment Democrats are just way too comfortable with power and way too comfortable with the status quo. That's why you didn't see them really fighting at first. It's why you have Michigan's Democratic Senator Alyssa Slotkin giving the green light on a handful of Dear Leader's cabinet nominations, like the dangerous and deranged former head of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem. But that being said, I don't think it's a stretch to conclude that thanks to the protest movements that we're seeing and have seen, like the previous No Kings rallies, or the anti-ICE rallies, or even the anti-data center protests, we're now seeing Democrats like Alyssa Slotkin having to make a different vote the second time around, because this week she voted against Dear Leader's second Homeland Security Director, MAGA nutball and Oklahoma Senator Mark Wayne Mullen. Same with fellow Michigan Senator Gary Peters, who also voted for Kristi Noem, but this time voted against Mullen. Again, this doesn't point to Slotkin suddenly realizing her mistakes and now she's all of a sudden going to act like Bernie in the Senate. No, I don't see that happening one bit. But had people not come out and protested or marched while Democrats in D.C. remain silent and feckless, do you think that she votes the same way? Do you think she votes against Mullen? I don't know. And what about those ICE protests that we saw in Minneapolis and the ICE concentration camp protests that we are seeing in Baldwin or for proposed sites in places like Romulus here in Michigan? Do you think had those people-powered movements not happened, that Senate Democrats, including Michigan, Slotkin, and Peters, would have strongly backed the Democrats' demands to hold up Homeland Security funding until some of their demands for ICE agents are met? I don't think they'd have the guts to do what they're doing now if not for the working class standing up against the regime's ICE Gestapo, some of them dying against the ICE Gestapo. Yet while demanding ICE must wear body cameras and go without masks, the system is broken, and ICE can't be reformed. It must be abolished. ICE must be completely abolished. There is no reforming. Abolishing ICE is the only recourse that Americans have to help regain our government and our democracy. ICE must be completely abolished. And that's something you won't hear from Alyssa Slotkin or Gary Peters. But this Saturday at these No Kings rallies and marches across Michigan and across the country, you're going to see millions and millions of Americans making those demands because the working class is fed up with being jerked around and being misrepresented or underrepresented, or maybe not even represented at all by those who are supposed to fight for us. Now, rather than simply compromise on some of the Senate Democrats', let's face it, weak demands, Dear Leader is doubling down on the chaos, of course, by installing ICE agents at airports. Now, it's not helping the hours and hours of long lines at airports and their TSA security check-in points, but that's not the point. The point is to own the libs, since owning the libs is what motivates the MAGA movement in general. That's it. That's their number one cause. And this move has really upset TSA agents across the country. One TSA agent from a Mid-Atlantic airport told Time magazine this week, quote, best cases, they, the ICE agents, will end up being in the way. Worst cases, well, we've seen what ICE can do in the worst cases. This is not about helping the TSA or helping working class passengers and customers. It's about spreading chaos and fear. But wait, I thought ICE was out in the streets taking criminals off the streets. How could we ever afford to lose their essential and important work to hang out at airports? I don't get it. Because it was never about safety. It was never about crime. It was about chaos and it was about fear. And we learned this week how a former aide to Dear Leader Steve Bannon told the Trump regime how sending ICE to airports could really serve as kind of a, test run for sending ICE to polling stations across the nation this fall. Oh, that's always what they wanted to do. The Trump regime tried stealing the 2020 election. Now, everyone, it's full-on fascism to block, intimidate, or arrest American citizens from voting in 2026. Meanwhile, ICE Gestapo agents continue to get paid, thanks to MAGA Republicans infusing billions and billions of dollars into the ICE budget. But TSA agents, no, they're not getting paid because MAGA Republicans in Congress are too scared to defy their dear leader, or they're just major dicks and dimwits. And we know that to be true with Michigan Republicans like Lisa McClain, Tim Walberg, Bill Huizenga, Louisiana Jack Bergman, Tom Barrett, my congressman, the ineffectual and human pylon, John Molinar in the central Michigan region, and of course, John James, who's running for governor while refusing to hold town halls, refusing to campaign, or even refusing to debate other Republicans on stage. It's all about spreading chaos and fear. Chaos and fear is what this regime thrives on. And this is why our corporate media wanted him back in power. They didn't like the boring Biden years. They wanted chaos and fear. These No Kings rallies happening this Saturday are in response to that chaos and fear, as you'll see nothing but working class Michiganders come out in large numbers to show their solidarity for all the working class and show their solidarity against the corporate and political elites who represent the Epstein class. leftoflansing@gmail.com is a good way to reach me. Hey, don't forget to subscribe to Left of Lansing on Patreon for free. I've been posting some thoughts there, including a link to all of the No Kings events for this Saturday across Michigan. Plus, that's where you can get the show and other content as well. So that's patreon.com/leftoflansing. Okay, well, gas prices are really digging into the pocketbooks of working class Michiganders, and it's all being done because of this U.S.-Israeli war on Iran. A war that nobody asked for here. We didn't ask for that. Although it is funny how MAGA Republicans are now all on board for this war, which just goes to prove to you they are just simple cucks for anything that Trump does. They have zilch. They have no values whatsoever, no principles except to own the libs and apparently to look at every kid's genitals in schools. And you remember when they talked a big game about protecting kids from pedophiles, yet there they are, literally protecting billionaires and elites from being exposed in the Epstein files. And when it comes to their dear leader, whose name appears thousands and thousands and thousands of times in the files, and who's also been accused of harming children, they are all about protecting Trump over the kids. But when it comes to Christian nationalism, well, protecting the kids is the least of their concerns. They are literally protecting pedophiles. And that's why I support Progressive Democratic State Representative and good friend of this show, Betsy Kafia's resolution in the State House calling on Congress to subpoena those implicated in the Epstein files and to make sure that they are fully investigated. Traverse City, of course, is in Betsy Kafia's district, and that is the right move to make. I mean, don't let MAGA Republicans on the federal and on the state level off the hook for how they are protecting their dear leader and protecting the billionaire and corporate elite donors. Keep the pressure on them because the victims deserve their justice from the Epstein class. But the Epstein class has dear leader Trump and Attorney General Pam Bondi in there right now to do one thing and one thing only, to protect the Epstein class. And the Epstein class is very happy with this war because, hey, they were busy for years buying politicians to eventually back this war on Iran, which is now Trump's war on Iran. And I will continue calling it Trump's war on Iran because even though Israel's right-wing and genocidal government is essentially running the show, dear leader told us that he's always the strongest man in the room, that he was a strong man, and he's always the one who's in command. And then he naps. The war in Iran is costing taxpayers over $20 billion so far, and it's actually even getting closer to the $30 billion mark. 13 American lives have been lost. Over 1,500 Iranian lives have been lost, including 160 girls from an all-girls school that we bombed to smithereens. Oh, but don't worry. MAGA Republicans will tell you, hey, that's just the fog of war. It happens. What happened to protecting children? I thought you guys cared about children. Kyle Bloomquist, who's a progressive Democrat running to become the party's nominee for Michigan's first congressional district in the UP and the Lower Peninsula, wrote the following on Twitter. And I just wanted to share it with you, okay, because it needs to be shared. He said, every single day, I think about the 168 little universes the Trump administration erased day one in Iran. Never ignore or forget American war crimes. Never accept this barbarism wrapped up in your flag. Damn. Now, that is the kind of straight talk that we need to hear from Democrats today on the campaign trail, today and every day to Election Day on the campaign trail. And that's why I'm fired up to talk with Kyle Bloomquist on next week's episode of Michigan's premier progressive podcast. This war is illegal, and it's destroying an already struggling and hurting working class in all regions of the state. Now, I mentioned gas prices being around $4.19 a gallon in many parts of Michigan, including in Gratiot County, where I reside. And Michigan's Democratic Socialist U.S. Senate candidate, Democrat Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, posted the following on his socials regarding the higher gas prices, and he said, quote, "Thank an AIPAC-bought politician." Exactly. Now, of course, that was a shot at his political opponents, both Democrats and Republicans, in the race for Michigan's open Senate seat this year as Gary Peters is retiring. And like Kyle Bloomquist, Dr. Abdul knows how to speak in plain English. How the Epstein class, which pays off and bribes the elite and establishment political party class, is completely to blame for allowing Trump's war on Iran to happen in the first place. Congress could demand a war powers vote, but it won't, and candidates like MAGA Florida Mike Rogers certainly won't call for such a vote. You see, Florida Mike Rogers got dear leader Trump's endorsement for that Senate race on the Republican side, so he has to constantly and continuously kiss dear leader's ring. I just have to say this, and I swear, I mean, for all of that macho bullcrap posturing that MAGA Republicans and MAGA talkers and influencers do on a daily basis, they are nothing but cucks for Trump on a daily basis. Where's their dignity? They have none. And it's a very, very beta move by all of them, if I may say so, but I digress. Now, it's just not Republicans who are for this war, though, as many Democrats can't seem to speak in plain English if they're against the war. Instead, they sound like, Michigan Senator Alyssa Socken, who talks about process, but who doesn't come out and say if we should ever be in a war on Iran to begin with. Let's not pay attention to the polls, of course, like the latest Reuters poll showing that just 35% of Americans approve of Trump's war on Iran, or how in that same poll, only 36% approve of dear leader's overall job performance. Hey, but don't pay attention to that. We're getting a new ballroom, people. Come on. Be proud to be an American under the Trump regime and the Epstein class. A ballroom, of course, that, you won't be able to attend. Now, the working class just wants someone to fight for them. And they need people who will share a vision. So that way they know that certain candidates and politicians will fight for them. And that vision means not accepting money from political action committees that bribe politicians to back, for instance, this Iran war, or at least won't criticize this war that much. For instance, establishment Democrat Haley Stevens, who's been a staunch advocate for Israel's right-wing genocidal government in Congress, and who loves herself some AIPAC dollars, sounded just like Alyssa Slotkin right after the bombing started by saying the regime should have consulted with Congress and followed the Constitution. Okay, good luck with that. Now, the other Michigan Democratic U.S. Senate candidate, State Senator Mallory McMorrow, said once the war began that Donald Trump is a dangerous, dishonest, and reckless president who cannot be trusted to unilaterally take our country to war. And McMorrow also said that this president has chosen a war overseas at the expense of everyone back home. Now, that's a little better than Miss AIPAC Haley Stevens' remarks, I'll say that. However, as we've talked about here, Mallory McMorrow's had some dealings with AIPAC in the past, including a drop site story which showed that Mallory McMorrow had privately produced an AIPAC position paper that at least one pro-Israel donor said was, quote, outstanding. But McMorrow has said that she's never accepted AIPAC money, nor got their endorsement, or has ever even sought AIPAC's endorsement. Still a little shaky there for Mallory McMorrow when it comes to AIPAC, but here's what's not so shaky, and it's pretty clear for everyone to see. A Detroit news story by Melissa Nan Burke this week showed that 3 Michigan Senate candidates took donations from, quote, federal contractors equipping or arming immigration enforcement agents as they carry out President Donald Trump's deportation agenda, including Republican Mike Rogers and a Democrat who has pilloried the agency, Haley Stevens. Now, the story says Mallory McMorrow originally took such donations but has since returned them. One candidate never received donations for the ICE Gestapo, and it's the one candidate that has called for ICE to be abolished. That candidate, of course, Dr. Abdul El-Sayed. And the Detroit News' Melissa Nan Burke also reported how Dr. Abdul has refused to accept any PAC money. He did it during his 2018 gubernatorial campaign, and he's doing it again during the Senate campaign. And Mallory McMorrow finally started to refuse PAC money for this election cycle. According to the Detroit News, McMorrow did accept PAC money for state Senate races, including nearly $80,000 in total from PACs including DTE Energy and Quicken Loans parent company Rock Holdings Incorporated. That's not good, but I guess better late than never that she's not accepting money for now. However, according to that story, it won't come to a shock to you to learn that Miss AIPAC herself, Haley Stevens, has taken in more than $250,000 from corporate PACs in the first 6 months of 2025, a figure that towers over what presumptive Republican nominee Florida Mike Rogers accepted from corporate PACs in that same period, totaling around $13,000. And Melissa Nan Burke continues by writing that Stevens accepted PAC money from big tech firms like Google and SpaceX. Oh, Elon Musk getting involved in the Haley Stevens campaign. How nice. But wait, there's more. She's accepted PAC money from insurers, including United Health Group, defense contractors like Honeywell International Incorporated, retail giants like Walmart and Amazon, and Michigan utility DTE and Consumers Energy. All that. That's a great list. What a great lineup. I don't know about you, but it doesn't really sound like to me that Haley Stevens is fighting on the working class's behalf. Now, does it? I mean, do you really think that she'll listen to the working class before she's going to listen to all these corporate donors and these corporate authoritarians? You see, this is why the working class is marching this week in the No Kings event. They are tired of corporations rigging the game against them as it's gone on for too long, and they're tired of politicians who helped them in rigging the game. The reckoning is at hand, and Michigan will not allow its choice to be between Florida Mike Rogers and an establishment Democrat like Haley Stevens, who will fight for essentially the same side, that side being the Epstein class. You're listening to LOL.
You're listening to Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. Left of Lansing is now on Patreon. You can check out a complete archive of the show and other stellar content Pat doesn't share on the show. Visit patreon.com/Left of Lansing. Become a member for free. But we won't be upset if you drop off a $5 donation when you visit. At the very least, it will help Pat pick up the bill the next time we meet up for lunch. I think I deserve it. And now you deserve more Left of Lansing.
Okay, joining me right now to talk about one of the many No Kings rallies and marches set to take place across Michigan on Saturday, March 28th is Leif Colt, who's the communications leader for Traverse Indivisible. Leif, thanks so much for taking a little time here to talk with us here on Michigan's premier progressive podcast. I appreciate it.
Oh, Pat, we sincerely appreciate you fitting us in. Thank you.
Hey, how long has Traverse Indivisible been around again?
Traverse Indivisible actually started shortly after the 2016 election. So they've actually been doing work in the Grand Traverse area for quite some time. I didn't join until after the most recent election, so I started in January of 25.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you, has membership and interest increased over the last year and a half or so for Traverse Indivisible?
Yeah, to say that membership increased almost understates it. It's been a literal explosion. We just had a large fundraiser last weekend, and our co-founder, John Dispelder, gave a speech. And in that speech, he said our membership today is 15 times what it was over a year ago. So membership has exploded, and there's a lot of people out looking for ways to get involved, looking to get activated, and just wondering in general what to do. So yeah, it's booming right now.
Oh, that is awesome. Yeah, and we talked with John last year. I think it was just before there was going to be a town hall, kind of like a mock town hall for your congressman up there, MAGA Republican Congressman Jack Bergman. And I remember, I mean, that was only, about 2 months into the second time here of the Trump presidency, and that auditorium was packed.
It was absolutely packed. Tickets weren't being sold, but it was, sold out. There was a max seating capacity, and Louisiana Jack Bergman was invited to that event. So I wouldn't even call it a mock town hall. He just chose not to show up. Our bone to pick with Jack Bergman goes back a long time. And that's one of those things, no matter who the president is, as long as Bergman is calling himself our representative, which I use in heavy air quotes, we're always going to be right by his side, standing there letting people know how negligent he is.
Since I've got you here, I haven't really been able to cover too much of the little infighting that's been happening up there with the Republicans, especially with Jack Bergman. It has to do something with, I think that he made an endorsement in a state Senate race, and some of those who are upset with him, this is on the Republican side, are now also attacking him for being in Louisiana a lot of the times. It's kind of unreal.
Well, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It's not just something people make up. It's a very real fact of the way he operates. There's documented news articles talking about the fact that his place up in Watersmeet, up in the UP, doesn't have a connected septic system. His neighbors say the driveway is never plowed. He has no problem saying that he spends many months down in Louisiana at his primary residence, basically. So, yeah, of course they would attack him on that. People of Michigan, we love our state. We take a lot of pride in being from here, regardless of a political affiliation. So I think for anybody, no matter what you think about the political situation, it's hard to stomach someone who calls himself a Michigander who spends more time south of that Mason-Dixon line.
If somebody comes up to you and says, something came across my Facebook, or I read an article about Traverse Indivisible and the Indivisible movement, but I'm not exactly sure what Indivisible is all about, what do you say to them?
I think that's a fair question. A lot of people, I think, have this perception of Indivisible as being this flaming left-wing, purely Democratic organization. And while the founders of the national movement did come from more Democratic backgrounds, it's essentially a movement that is set up to put civic power and just power over ownership of our country into the hands of the people, regardless of political affiliation. Not all chapters, but definitely at Traverse Indivisible, we are nonpartisan, regardless of how people look at us. So our door is always open to centrists, people who can't stomach Trump Republicans, far leftists, the 89 million people who didn't vote in the last election. We have our door open to everybody. And where we go with the actions we take, the types of policies we push, the type of education we give to the community is all based on what benefits the working class people of the United States. That is the only thing that matters to us. And if there were people in the Republican Party who represented the true will of the people and not just as a talking point, we would absolutely be supporting them as well. And so what we do is kind of a multi-pronged approach. We obviously set up and organize protests. We organize public pressure campaigns against officials and billionaire elites. But we also just put education into people's hands. We teach them about the issues. We teach them about different ways to get involved. And we also just want people to pick a thing. It's something that I think all organizers, even outside of the Indivisible movement, say. People are like, what do I do? Or I'm so frustrated. I'm looking around and I'm not liking what I see, or I'm having trouble putting groceries on the table and I want to take ownership over that. And I'm worried about my family's security. And we'll just say, pick one thing. Choose the thing that you can do. What is your talent? What do you like doing? Find that one thing and then do that and put it to service and use that as resistance work. Use it to build up your community and your neighbors. It doesn't have to be calling your Congress members. It doesn't have to be writing letters to the editor. It doesn't even have to be coming out to a protest march. Every single person is needed in this moment. And we've kind of come out of a long period of lulled comfort, I guess you could call it. Or maybe we're being hypnotized by corporate America and wealthy people who kind of want to do what they want with the country. I feel like this is a moment when a lot of people are kind of snapping out of that. And we're realizing that we were kind of on autopilot too long. And the United States of America is made by, for, and of the people. And without people being actively engaged in this country, it leaves the people who have agendas to world build, essentially. And so Indivisible is just a way for normal people, not political people, normal people to get involved, to learn new tools of how to get involved, and hopefully to motivate them to, spread their message, whatever that is, and to help activate their neighbors, their family, their communities.
Leif, do you think that indivisible chapters throughout the state, such as Traverse Indivisible, do you think it gained such traction here right after the 24 election because it appeared to many working class Michiganders that some of our Democratic leaders, either in the state or on the federal side, didn't really seem to get the urgency of what a second Trump regime meant to working class families?
That's big facts, Pat. I definitely feel a lot of people feel that way. And, Traverse Indivisible itself, again, because of our nonpartisan stance and because of where we're located up here, people can view Traverse City as highly liberal. But I'll tell you, this is about as big of a battleground and as big as a politically divided community as you can get. And I don't mean division as far as conflict. I mean, just people's beliefs here there's a lot of variety. So I do think that in general, no matter what the party is, Republican or Democrat, people are looking at our leaders and then seeing what's happening, not just from like a political nature of the daily outrage from the Trump regime, but also just looking at their pocketbooks, looking at their job and what their salary has been doing over the past few years, looking at their health insurance. Every single aspect of daily life, no matter your political affiliation, is getting more difficult. And when you're talking specifically about those Democratic leaders who many were hoping were going to be a resistance, a firewall against things getting as bad as they have, frankly, what we have seen from over 75% of those Democrats is complicity. Alyssa Slotkin voted for Kristi Noem. And look at how that turned out. And this is someone who likes to talk a big game about standing for the people of Michigan, standing for the Constitution, has sworn the oath to protect against enemies foreign and domestic, and then they're going right ahead with someone who is bulldozing the Constitution and putting people like Kristi Noem and Hegseth into office. That is unacceptable to so many people. This isn't just a moment for waking people up, getting people activated and more involved in politics in general. I think the Democratic Party personally has a choice to make right now. And you're kind of seeing that with the old school Chuck Schumer establishment. I like to call them dusty Democrats because they just represent that old way of doing business. And while one might be able to argue that their perception is the Democratic Party has more closely aligned with people forward values, that's what they talk. But how they act is them bowing to corporate donors, bowing to the Israel lobby, bowing to all these different forces that are trying to shape this country that are not the will of the people. And so, yeah, I do think there's this natural snapback of like, you've even seen the National Indivisible movement who, they make their endorsements and things. But after, I think it was after the first big shutdown when we had the Chuck Schumer surrender, then the will of the people, all of the polls, everything was saying, stay shut down. You guys have the chips. We are with you. We support you in the shutdown. And then he did whatever his backroom deal was, and they collapsed. After that, the National Indivisible movement announced they were going to have one of the largest primary campaigns they have ever had. They are looking for Democrats all across the country who need to be primaried, and they are just looking to find people who represent the actual will of the people and not corporate interests. And it has been a huge part of what's going on. And moving towards the upcoming elections in 2026, I think you're going to see that even more. I know that we've been doing a little bit of work. Our sister organization, TIES, which is a 501c3, they are actually putting on a Meet the Candidates forum on April 1st. That's at the Milliken Auditorium here in Traverse City, where they have invited all of the candidates that are in the Michigan District 1 congressional seat. Oh. So Bergman was invited, Callie Barr was invited, Kyle Bloomquist, Republican, Democrat, Independent, doesn't matter. Again, just trying to give them a chance to speak and find those candidates that actually practice what they preach and represent what people need in the country right now.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah, I'm going to be having Kyle Bloomquist on the show next week, actually. I just wanted to say real quick before we talk about the No Kings rally here coming up this weekend, one thing that I really respect and like about the Indivisible movement and Traverse Indivisible especially is your successful outreach program, because I remember seeing how there were over a couple thousand people out there protesting in January after the murders of Renee Good and Alex Preddy by the ICE agents there in Minneapolis. And I think that just goes to show a good people-powered movement, a good protest movement like what you guys are doing. It doesn't just wait around and react to politicians. A good movement like yours is making politicians react to the people, and I like that.
Yeah, that's a big challenge that we always have is how can we be more proactive and make the administration be on their heels and less reactionary? But in a way, we are reactionary. We just aren't reactionary to what the government is doing and what politicians are doing. We are reactionary to the will of the people. So I think that's what makes it really easy for us. And I think we have a cheat code here in Grand Traverse County. Our community and the people of this region are so tight-knit and so awesome. That ICE protest you mentioned was less than a 24-hour alert that we had put out, hey, we're doing this protest. And then the next day we had over 2,000 people in downtown. We got picked up by the Rachel Maddow show. That was just a great example of we were listening. Obviously, we were deeply disturbed by those brutal killings, but the people in our community were, and we picked up that, we listened to what they were saying, and then we reacted on that. Traverse Indivisible, as much as in the Indivisible movement as a whole, as much as we want many people in this movement, we aren't selling anything. This isn't like your traditional group where you're trying to market yourself in a typical way and put out a message and hope people are fooled or hope that connects with them. We literally are looking at what people want, looking at what people need, and looking at the problems people have. And then we simply act on those. And when I say we, I mean, that's even in large air quotes. We don't have anyone telling us what to do. National Indivisible does not dictate how a group can act, what that group's function is. The group is made by the people that join that group and by the people that comment on those Facebook pages or that come to those monthly meetings. We aren't selling anything. We're just basically connecting to people and letting them know, yes, you have this power. This isn't just your power. This is, in this moment, this is almost your obligation to want to get involved and to do all this. And it just makes it really, really easy for those rapid turnarounds and to know where our North Star is. It's what politicians should be doing, frankly, is just listening to the people of this country.
It's what they should be doing.
Right?
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about the No Kings Part 3 rally here planned for this Saturday, March 28th throughout the state. And of course, there's one in Traverse City. Before we just go through some of those details, Leif, what do you think is going to be different about this No Kings rally compared, to the previous ones?
Well, for us, our biggest change this time, again, we listen to the people. We are going with a purely march format. We are not going to have any sort of program. Me personally, I love the programs. I love the speeches, and I love how it kind of gets everyone in a single area. But what we hear almost every time with our big No Kings marches is like, we just want to get out there on the street. We just want to have our signs up. Let's march. We'll definitely do more of like your traditional kind of rally/protest events in the future. But for this one, we're going straight march. march. So we have a meeting area. People are meeting at F&M Park, which is just adjacent to downtown. They're going to start meeting there at about 1 o'clock. And we will gather a critical mass. And then once that gets too large, or around 1:10, we will start walking on the sidewalks to downtown and then through downtown with thousands of our friends. So that's really the biggest difference for us. Another thing that we are so excited about is here in town, we have various different singing groups, some singing circles. We've had TC Sings, which is a group that comes to some of our No Kings events, does protest music and chants. They have now all grown and morphed into a single organization called the Northern Michigan Justice Singers Coalition. And their whole idea is that their form of resistance is through joyful song and singing collectively together with your neighbors. And so they have been doing large community sings where they are finding people who want to step up as song leaders, and they're teaching everyone in the community these songs. So when you hear them at a protest, you don't have to feel awkward about it. You already know the lyrics. You've already sang with those people. And song and joyful noise is going to be a much larger part of this protest. They're going to have a group stationed at F&M Park, a group stationed at Rotary Park, which is right in the heart of downtown on the corner of Union and State Street. And then they're also going to find some of the choke points of the march route, like where there's a stoplight or a busy intersection. And they're probably going to have some pairs that are standing there and singing song, helping people get into song as they're waiting there to cross the street. So I would say those are the two big differences for us this time around.
Oh, that's awesome. And, one thing I like about the idea of a march compared to just being in one place and having a rally is that this allows more people to see you guys and as you're marching, and maybe allow other citizens to understand, hey, you know what? I really am not alone in being angry at this time and being upset of where this country has been going.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Visibility is always a big concern for us. And one of the criticisms you'll get, even from people on the left, is, protest isn't going to change anything. Protest, what is that going to do? And you're right. Protest doesn't solve anything by itself. It is part of a multi-pronged approach where every single aspect needs to be working in coordination to stop a fascist or authoritarianism movement like this. So it's one part of it. And the main kind of two functions of a protest in my eyes are the visibility thing is letting other people in your community see that, is getting media attention so they can see it, and then it puts more pressure on the politicians. But then also it's like a motivational thing for the people who do participate in it, or for someone that sees the march or even just knows that it's going on, who's having these feelings of anxiety or frustration, but maybe for whatever their own reasons they can't get involved. It gives you this uplifting feeling that people are doing something, like, oh my gosh, with No Kings 3, we had about 7,000 people. So to just look and see those pictures of like, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one. Those are the two big reasons that protests really do matter. And there's a lot of other things that it can accomplish, but that visibility piece is huge. And we had thought about just doing it at F&M Park. But again, we would just be trapped in like a residential area, and one of the things all of our protesters in town here love is the people driving by in their cars. Sure, you get to do some awesome bird watching, but there's also the vast majority of people are honking their horns, rolling down their window and saying thank you. That's a huge part of it. And I do think that's one of the cool advantages of doing this march, especially going through the heart of downtown Traverse City.
Right. And that's a great point about people who are honking in approval during a protest, because not only does that make, I think, those in the protest movement feel, hey, all right, we're reaching people, but I think it helps those who couldn't be at those protests, or maybe they had other things going on in their lives, which is why they're driving at that time. However, they see others who are out there doing the fight, and they're feeling like, okay, I'm not the only one who feels this way. Even those who might feel a little apathy with our political system, it still makes them feel like, okay, again, I'm not alone in being disappointed and being downright angry at the direction of the country. And so I'm going to honk my horn. That really does a lot of good. I really believe that. And I shared this story about a month and a half ago, but I'm just going to share it again for those who maybe didn't hear it. But on a Saturday afternoon, I was walking my dog in the downtown area of my town, and there was one man, just one, carrying a sign, and I wasn't sure what the sign said. So we walked closer, and then I noticed it was an anti-Trump sign. And guess what? People were honking their horns as they drove by. So there was just one guy getting people engaged and letting others know, hey, you're not alone in this pretty red area of the state. So that showed me how the power of protest can really get people engaged and let people know, again, that they're just not alone.
Yeah, and it shows you just, there's people in smaller towns or people doing any action. They may be like, oh, I don't have enough people helping me with this or whatever. You do, and this carries over to everything in life. You never know what the ripple effects of one small action will be. And every single large movement throughout human history started with a single person who had an idea and did something or voiced it to a friend. That is an undeniable fact. And so, yeah, that's beautiful and inspiring. And I love that image. I love those guys that are just out there doing the work, especially in an area like that.
That's right. All right. So finally, what time does everything get started there on Saturday?
So it's this Saturday. The march official time is 1 p.m. until 3 p.m. The meeting place is F&M Park, which is just adjacent to downtown. One note on that is we do encourage, if you're worried about parking, need to be parking close. Maybe you can't walk too far or something like that. You might want to show up a little early. You can also, we're encouraging people to either carpool or take the beta buses. We have a very thorough event website where there's tons of information. You can find it right on our homepage. There's a No Kings 3 button up in the navigation, or you can head to traversindivisible.org/event info, and that page has literally everything you would need: the marching route, parking instructions. It has all of our ADA accessibility information and more on there. So that's the best place to get information.
All right. And I'll make sure to share that page wherever people are getting this podcast this week too.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem. All right. Well, that's all the time we got. Leif Colt, communications leader for Traverse Indivisible. Thanks for talking about the No Kings 3 March planned here for this Saturday, March 28th in Traverse City. And I wish you luck. And I'll make sure to visit Traverse Indivisible's Facebook page and share some of the pictures of the event with some of my followers there, okay?
Pat, you're a boss. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you again. And come back again and visit us, okay?
Absolutely, I will.
You're listening to Michigan's premier progressive podcast. It's Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. Have you ever heard Pat's lectures on why desserts with fruit aren't really desserts? Or why the 70s produced the greatest movies of all time? I have. So be happy you're just hearing him rant about politics. If you'd like to contact Pat about politics or debate how cocoa is technically a fruit, send a message to leftoflansing@gmail.com. Here's Pat Johnston.
Hey, special thanks to Leif Colt from Traverse Indivisible for being on the show again. Like I said, I'll provide a link to the No Kings March by Traverse Indivisible for this Saturday in Traverse City, and I'll provide a link so you can see when and where the nearest No Kings Rally March is happening for you on this Saturday, March 28th. I'll also provide a link to different Indivisible chapters across Michigan, and you'll find those links wherever you're listening to the show and, of course, on Left of Lansing's Patreon page. Let's do a quick review of last week's LOL poll. And the question was, should Michigan move its primary from August to May? 53% of you said yes, that you'd like to see it move to May, while 47% of you said no, keep it in August. So a close vote there. And I have to tell you, I find it funny how there are some MAGA Michigan Republicans out there who right now are trying to move tax and millage votes that we have in May to Election Day in November because they say that May elections are a sneaky way for millage votes to pass, while a sizable majority is not really paying attention. But at the same time, they have no problem joining the Democratic majority in the Senate and passing this bill, moving Michigan's primary from August to May. Now, why is that? I'll tell you why. Incumbency, that's why. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, the bill passed the Democratic majority in the Senate. And hey, that's easy to believe because some of those Democrats want to keep their seats too. By moving primaries from August to May, it no longer gives non-incumbent candidates and their campaigns enough time to make their cases and to gain voter recognition. The shorter the time you see, the better for incumbency. And that's why you're seeing bipartisan support for this bill in Lansing. Oh, I know. County clerks say that the turnaround from August to the general election is quick and difficult, but that's not the main motivation here. It's about incumbency, which is why I am all about Michigan's primary always being held in August. All right, let's move on to this week's LOL poll. And the question is, if the Michigan Democratic primary for the U.S. Senate seat were held today, how would you vote? Your choices, of course, are Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, Congresswoman Haley Stevens, or State Senator Mallory McMorrow. You can vote in a couple of places during the next week here, including on Left of Lansing's Twitter page, YouTube page, and also on Patreon. Votes will be tallied next week and shared with you on next week's show. Time now for Left of Lansing's Last Call. Well, when you're being praised by Matt Hall, you know you've done screwed up. MAGA Republican State House Speaker and living man-baby Matt Hall released a statement this week praising former Democratic State House Speaker Joe Tate, who announced this week that he will no longer seek re-election for his seat in Detroit. Now, MAGA Matt Hall in his statement said that Joe Tate may have been, quote-unquote, the only respected leader in the, quote-unquote, Democrat caucus. Now, of course, it's Democratic, but like Matt Hall's dear leader, Matt must follow in the footsteps and act like nothing but a child and also be a cuck as well. Now, Hall recognized Joe Tate on being the first African-American House Speaker, which, yes, is noteworthy, which, yes, is important, which, yes, of course, is historic. But then Matt Hall wrote the following, and I'd just like to share it with you. He said that Joe Tate deserved better from his party. He was a dying breed as a sometimes moderate Democrat, making him an outlier in his own Democrat caucus. Radical left-wing Democrats like Representatives Jamie Churches, Betsy Kafia, and Jen Hill openly rebelled against him and torpedoed his top priority, which was the land value tax, even after I found significant Republican support to pass it. The radical left also leveraged Tate time after time for their selfish individual priorities while squandering the historic Democrat trifecta opportunity. He was then unceremoniously removed by his own Democrat caucus after House Republicans reclaimed the House majority and elected me as Speaker. Now, speaking of that land value tax, it's something that former Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan was pressing for a long time, but it never had the support to pass. It was a failure. But even more noteworthy is how Matt Hall later says that Democrats have privately told him that they made a mistake and should have kept Joe Tate as the leader. Right, I'm sure that happened. Sure, Matt. Sure. Now, let's remind everyone of this. The reason Matt Hall is attacking a progressive Democratic state representative like Betsy Kafia is because Betsy Kafia called out the corporate corruption and corporate rot inside of Lansing. She called out Democratic leaders for putting corporate interest above the working class, especially during the lame duck session of 2024 when polluter pay bills, the FOIA reform and government transparency bills, work protection bills for nurses, and more were sidelined for corporate-sponsored bills. And I say that because one of the few things to pass during that lame duck was a major corporate welfare bill granting state taxpayer money to billionaire tech bro data centers. That's what passed. Now, yes, under Joe Tate's watch, Democrats did pass some progressive bills like repealing right to work for less, providing a stronger working class earned income tax credit, gun violence protection bills such as red flag laws, and further strengthening abortion rights. However, Joe Tate pressed hard for corporate subsidies and tax breaks for corporate donors, including for DTE and Consumers Energy. And don't forget this, Joe Tate's former chief of staff, by sheer dumb luck, somehow got a seat on the Michigan Public Service Commission that's currently allowing construction of data centers across the state. Governor Gretchen Whitmer removed a clean energy advocate from that commission and replaced her with Joe Tate's former chief of staff. Funny how that works. Plus, Joe Tate is backing Miss AIPAC herself, Haley Stevens, for the Democratic U.S. primary seat, and former Ambassador Bridget Brink for that 7th Congressional District seat being held by MAGA Republican Tom Barrett. Well, that's interesting, too, because Bridget Brink has accepted campaign bribes from pro-right-wing Israeli government defenders. Well done, Joe. Well done. Now, Matt Hall is protecting Joe Tate and attacking solid progressive and working class fighters because Matt Hall and Joe Tate are an illustration, a stark illustration of what is wrong in Lansing, an illustration of protectors for corporate corruption. I have to tell you, Joe, when you've got someone like Matt Hall defending you, maybe it's time for you to ask, where did you go wrong?
You're listening to Left of Lansing. Music for the show and everything else on Left of Lansing is provided by Wanderbeats. To hear the latest project and complete music archives, check out Space Leopard on your favorite streaming site or subscribe to Space Leopard on YouTube. Now, back to our favorite progressive voice in Michigan. It's Pat Johnston.
Well, that's going to do it for this edition of The Left of Lansing. Thanks again to Leif Colt from Traverse Indivisible for talking with us here this week. Next week, progressive Democratic candidate for Michigan's 1st congressional district located in the UP and parts of the northern Lower Peninsula, Kyle Blomquist will join the show. Now, Kyle's running for Louisiana Jack Bergman's seat. And another reason I really wanted to talk with Kyle is because he's running on a pro-working class agenda, such as Medicare for all, universal health care, stronger union protections, and housing for all. So Kyle Blomquist will join us here next week to talk about his vision and his campaign. And I need to say this because I told you last week that progressive Democratic candidate for Michigan's 7th congressional district, William Lawrence, would be on the show here this week. But your esteemed host, once in a while, fails to be able to read a calendar and got it all wrong. But don't worry, William and his people said that he'll be on the show later on in April. And I'm looking at the calendar right now, and I'm just realizing this is the last show for the month of March, which means it's time for my annual Detroit Tigers win prediction. I know that many of you have been sitting on the edge of your seats for this one, so I'll just tell you this. Better starting pitching this year, some decent offense for a change, some better fielding, and they always have a good manager. All of that bodes well for a solid 2026 season for the Tigers, and that is why I'm saying they will win 94 games this year. Mark it down. So go Tigers and take part in a No Kings protest near you this Saturday, March 28th. And of course, as always, remember, take the battle to them. Thank you, Michigan.
You've been listening to Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. Left of Lansing was produced by Pat Johnston, brainstormed by Pat Johnston, researched by Pat Johnston, written by Pat Johnston, edited by Pat Johnston, and yes, hosted by Pat Johnston. Technical assistance by Dr. Heather. Thanks to our good friend Rich for website assistance, and thanks to our good friend Kirsten for the awesome podcast logo. We thank Audio Boom for publishing the podcast every week. Visit leftoflansing.com for more news and information. Thanks again for listening to Michigan's premier progressive podcast, and we'll talk with you again next week.